Welcome, everyone. We've just finished FireCircle 2022, the big main room session. And our topic of conversation today was healing our systems. Now, we had a group of facilitators in the room who met with everyone in the room in private group sessions where they were able to unpack how the conversation that we had earlier was impacting them. And they had a 25-minute session. We had 3 rounds with 3 different questions. What needs to heal? What needs to change? What's our part in it? And what hope do we have? Then we met back in the big room, and each facilitator held up a piece of paper with the key words that happened in their room. We had some time in silence to just reflect on how these words were impacting us. Now, after the FireCircle closed this morning, I had an opportunity to get into a Zoom room with the facilitators and really hear what went on in the room. Each of them shared for about 3 to 5 minutes a bit more of the story threads connected to their words. And these are those sessions. I invite you to have a listen to see how they speak to you, because we are putting together an impact report through Impact Arts after this FireCircle that we will then share to the levels of government, labor leaders, and change agent social impact organizations who can move these recommendations forward. So have a listen. Be sure to share your thoughts in the way that you can. Reach us here on Powerhouse, and let's keep this change work moving forward. I'm Tina Overbury. I'm the Managing Director at Powerhouse, and I'm grateful to be with you. Let's listen to what they have to say. We are recording. Let's start harvesting what happened in our breakout rooms, and we're just going to popcorn. And I see that your square's lit. Hillary, does that mean you're first?
It does, I think. So I just wanted to thank the people in my room for their amazing contributions: Jody, Patricia, Jana, Maya, and Brenda. And my paper, we really talked when there was the 3 questions, but we really did focus on a lot of the challenges and the problems with the systems, and then moved to some of the solutions and some of the hope, but really a lot of the, so I wanted to honor that by including some of the things that were mentioned, like inaction, injustice, a lot of emphasis that it was all the systems and how intersectional they were, and that it felt like just focusing on one isn't really getting to the bottom of the solution. Some discussion about violence and lateral violence and racism and all the isms that are at the root of all the systemic discrimination and problems with the systems we have. And then, the solutions. So just trying to capture here this idea of intersectional, interconnectedness, both at the, it was like both at the interconnectedness at the ecosystem level, but also at the human level. So it was all the way through, at the highest level, and then also deep in those relationships between the systems and the relationships between individual humans. So at all those levels. And real justice, what that means in different contexts. Long-term vision. So, in a lot of systems, certainly in the system that I focus on, capitalism, it's, these quarter by quarter visions, which is incredibly, we felt, and that was echoed, harmful, and being able to hold that long-term vision, although there's things you can do now, there's aren't some actions you can do today and start where you are, and holding space for that long-term vision. And the other thing that came up in kind of different ways is reclaiming your leadership and stepping into your part of the healing. So even though everything is interconnected and everything needs to heal, we as individuals may have a particular voice that speaks to a particular situation, and really standing in that brightest light of what's my work in the world, as I call it. And that was sort of said in a few different ways by the group. So yeah, that's us.
Thanks. Thanks, Hillary. I'm going to actually toss, I know we're going to popcorn, but I'm going to toss to you, Tina, if that's okay, because I know that you might have to go as well. So yeah, let's go to you.
That's great. Thanks, Hillary. And thanks for popcorning me in, Tina. So here is the visual of my group. And I'll come back to that. I just wanted to thank the wonderful women in my group, Carrie, Gail, Ellie, and Daphne, and for their participation and honest sharing. It was an incredible discussion. And we kind of got stuck at what needs to change because there is so much. So we zoned in on a few things after a couple of bounce backs in our discussion. And on here, we put caring purpose on the top, because it can't just be about profit anymore. That was a common thing that came up, that what we're trying to achieve doesn't work anymore in our systems. And that's what we came up with, the caring purpose. And then in that, leadership balance. Twice it came up with the leadership voices. So what came from the participants was a representative voice, or a balance and representation reflective of community. For example, at the table here in Powerhouse, we're heavily weighted in women. So we would like to see more men join. And it was nice to see a few today. That's the balance in the leadership. And then encircling all of that was the mindset shift to go towards caring purpose. Because we can't have profit with caring purpose, because we do need to incorporate that. But really what came up was we just can't measure profit anymore. And what's our part in this individually? What came up was our energy collectively, as in this room with Powerhouse, has a force, and to not underestimate that. Our part is to keep doing what we are doing individually and joining groups to keep evolving and growing and building. I think of a dust ball. They just grow, but we're growing. And that's just happening because what our part is to keep showing up and doing our passion work. And that's what we're all doing here at Powerhouse, change makers. So that's the part. And then the hope that can be offered is that the passion and care and true, authentic desire to make meaningful change is evident in each and every one of us. So the hope we offer individually and collectively is that there is hope. And that's the end of my group's share. Thanks.
Thanks, Tina.
I'll bounce from Tina, because my group was very, I would say, aligned with where you were at as well, Tina, around the caring aspect. And I just would first like to acknowledge that the people in my group. So there was Mladenka and Carrie, Antoinette, and Tina. And we kind of segue. Well, we started off what needs to change, and what started off in the conversation was really coming down and honing to individuals. And while there's the systems, it comes down to how do we start to shift our mindsets, and how do we start to listen actively and listen intently and treat everybody that they matter, and that everybody is valued in this world. And how do you do that when someone holds a very different perspective on what they think is valuable in the world? So that was sort of where we went to in terms of caring for all people. And this word caring came up a bit. And I guess that's not really on our words, but these are our words that we came up with. Compassion and canoe and clarity, or the three words we agreed upon. But this but when we start to care for all people, marginalized people, people who think differently than us, people who challenge us, what's going on, and really getting sort of behind underneath what's happening for that person. So it came from that perspective of that. We talked a lot about safe space and holding safe space, brave space. What does that really mean to be in safe space? Which really comes down to how do we hold a lens of non-judgment or an acceptance? How do we park ourselves in some of those moments to let all of the voices be heard that maybe are different than ours? So it was interesting sort of to just to think about what does it mean to hold brave and safe space in that container. We dove into this whole concept of being in the canoe, which has been talked about quite a bit through Powerhouse, but even this morning. And we're in this together. And the more we can care for each other and be in this together, you know, that's what we sort of need to be able to do, is to make sure that we're all in the canoe together, or finding a canoe to be in, where we feel valued and we feel held in that space. And then I think there was a lot of clarity that came up from some of our conversations, that we were kind of all, I think, I forget who talked, I think it was maybe you, Lisa, talked about or someone talked about being validated, or being, we're in the, yeah, there was clarity that we're all on the same page in terms of what we want to achieve. And it's not that hard. It may seem daunting when we think about systems, but it really comes down to individual caring. It's actually kind of easy to care for somebody. So that's pretty much what came up for us. And a lot of hope and hopeful was a word that came up, and it's not on here, but there was a lot of hope that people had, and joy, knowing that we have a way forward with each other. So that's sort of where we landed. Thank you.
Thanks, Dory.
I can pop in now. Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge the wonderful people that I was in a room with, which was Wendy, Courtney, Nikki, Helena, and Kaylee. We didn't get through the 3 questions.
We didn't either.
Time evaporated before our eyes. Like, by the time we sort of brought ourselves back from the bigness of the big room, and we were like, okay, let's just bring ourselves together, because when I went in, like, the energy was like this. And so it's just like, let's bring us all back together first, and then we can have the conversation. And it was very much around the need for the need for throwing out the old system and building it completely anew. But it was also learning what did work about the old systems, and what we can learn from that, what we can take from, you know, those existing systems as they are right now, and rebuilding into this new way of being. And that's where these words really come from. There's at the bottom there, there's extra words that accidentally got written on here after the fact. So it's partnership, community, allyship, generations, and then the little words, women's voices. Yes, women's voices are changing the world, and that was said in the room, but it didn't make it into the big pen. I'm not sure why. But it was this conversation around what do we need, because we are all heading towards a unified goal. Yeah, we all have a similar vision of how we want the things to be. And it's like, what do we need to make that happen? And that's where these words came from, like I say. So, you know, several people said, yeah, we need partnerships. Like, the individuals need to partner up, the collectives need to partner up. So it's just, you know, like the snowball. Who said about dust balls? Somebody, Tina, I think it was it? Yeah, the you know, as the snowball effect of bringing all the people together into community, and finding your community so you're not isolated, because it's really easy to fall into the trap of believing that you're the only person that thinks the way you do, and that everybody else is right and you're wrong because you're just, who are you to even be thinking so differently from everybody else? And so it is the finding of this community. And then it was mentioned the fact that, you know, privileged people also need to enter into this discussion. And for them, you know, like white privileged, you know, people, to find their voice, because there was a lot of talk about, I can't find my voice in this because I'm not Indigenous, I'm not marginalized. How do I talk? How do I represent my feelings in this world when I'm not part of the marginalized group? And so that's where allyship came in, because we need the allies. We need the allies. And that was really interesting. And then, you know, and it's, why are we doing it all? It's because we want a better world for all of the future generations, all the future generations coming through. That's why we do it. And we know that there is a better way. And so it's by this collection, by being an individual and healing as an individual, but then all these healed people creating, and that's an excellent one, collaboratively, not collectively. I really liked that. Yeah, so it's a collaboration, not just a collection. Yeah, I really like that. And a desire to go back to the land, to go back into true appreciation of all that we have. Yeah, so that. And then, like I say, we sort of ended with, you know, women's voices are changing the world. So yeah, it was an amazing room. Thank you all who were in it.
Thank you.
I'll jump in, Tina, because I have a good segue with what Jenna was saying. There was very much a theme of the impact of the individual. What can an individual do, and how to shift from fear and hopelessness to hope and impact. And the overriding theme was the power of women, that we've had to learn to do things differently, and in so doing we have to step into our ability to affect change. And we piggybacked on some of the conversation from the bigger group of literally gathering our energies and being very intentional when we step into a room, and very mindful of how we want to show up, to be heard, to be listened to be impactful. And that's where we came up with one of the words, which was rematriating. But we obviously, the core of it is a cooperative environment, like you were saying, Janet, not just a collective, but it's working in unison, even if it's individual, but it's with that the common goal of effecting change, and knowing that all systems need to change. And we had a good conversation about effecting change by dismantling and rebuilding concurrently, and doing so from the inside out and from the outside in. And we had a discussion about, okay, so we know that we want to make a difference. We feel the ability to do so as an individual, but how? And the how was to find the crack, and to step into that crack and step through. And that's where there's the opportunity for change. And also to do it from the outside, from standing on the periphery of the system. So we talked about being in the system, a member of the system, but looking at it externally, standing on the outside, keeping the objectivity, and then finding that opportunity, that crack, stepping into ourselves and knowing ourselves well enough, and then going through and making that change. So it was quite a process. And we talked a lot about healing. And as I mentioned before we started the recording, my wonderful people, who, by the way, I need to thank Dana, Natasha, Karen, and Anne-Marie, who all have done a tremendous amount of individual healing, family healing, and then brought those skills to the work that they each do in a variety of different fields. Again, restorative justice, to the healthcare system, to the education system, to the church systems. It was just really fascinating to see such cohesion in the desire to make the change, yet they were all coming from very different systems. But it almost seemed like they had this one way of approaching the change that was just so powerful and impactful. And there was a concept of motherhood and of generation, and having a long-term vision was really, really important. One of the phrases was making space for future ancestry, which I thought was a really amazing way of framing it. So that's how holding the space for change was also one of the concepts. And then the individual being the hope, bringing that hope to the future. We've messed up the past, I get it. And we can't change that. And we can certainly learn but also have a longer term vision was really important for this group. And it was amazing. And they had very much the concept of hands at the back, and the work that each one of these incredible people were doing was the biggest message they had for the people they impacted was, I'm here. I have your back. I have your back. And it was just amazing to feel the generosity of these people and their willingness to put all of themselves into whatever they did for the sake of others. And there was such healing in that concept, in that ability to do that, and to literally mindfully get up every day and not give in to despair, and be there and know that whatever they did was going to be for the benefit of something or someone. It was an amazing, amazing session.
Wow. Thanks, Angela. Thank you.
I can popcorn in, and I would concur. I think our conversation could have went on for much longer. I was really grateful to the ladies and a diverse group of women, even amongst that. And so Danny, Jackie, Iwana, Rebecca, and Louise joined us. And, you know, we talked about, there was a real understanding and a parallel to what some of you have said in terms of we're all here for the same thing, right? It's not about a competition. And while we may come in with opposing views and different ideas, at the end of the day, we want change, and we want to ignite and spark that change for better. And so really, you know, some of what I can do and some of the hope and some of what needs to change was all collectively done in that common ground, right? What do we need? We need a common ground. But I can find that common ground with others. I can make that choice to do that. And when we amplify that voice of women, when we recognize and stop the suppression and recognize, I love this, the sacredness of women and the valued contribution of all that are involved, that bring their wholeness to the room and to the change that's happening. So much can happen, and they talked about really needing that, right? We also talked about story. And again, you know, Janet, you alluded to this. We aren't in this alone. We're not the only one going through this. So when we open ourselves, when we have self-expression, when we share with others, we can build different. And I loved what was shared in terms of we can build different. And I think, you know, I kind of added it in having the courage to unlearn, having the courage to lift others as well. And I think we all have the ability to do that in our own right. And again, it's about choice. And where we sometimes pay attention to the subtle, right? Sometimes, right, we keep coming back in the discussion earlier today about the crack. And sometimes it is in the crack where the greatest light shines through. We keep coming back to the crack and coming back to the crack. And sometimes that crack can be so subtle. But what can happen out of it can be monumentous. And so really paying attention and creating the space for growth, creating the awareness as well to allow ourselves to see what is the subtle, and where does it go from here. So very grateful for this discussion today.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly.
If I may, I'm sorry, Carolyn. Do
Oh,
you mind? I need to leave in about.
oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. Please forgive me for jumping in. And I'll do my best to be brief. So thank you all for sharing. And I'm hearing so much cohesion in what we've all experienced. And so this is, I'll just share quickly. Think like a meadow, from general think to individual responsibility, illumination of, and unity of all beings. And I had the joy of being in a group with Christine and Gord and Veronica and Victoria and Christina. The sharings were very much similar to what we've spoken about of individual, like we have this focus on, it's kind of a two-way street. So a lot of people are focused on only me and not thinking of the greater good. And then at the same time, there's the experience of thinking in these large systems, and that needs to change without taking personal responsibility. So there was this repetition of, from the general to the specific, and from specific back out to the general, that there's that integration. And then they also spoke about personal well-being. So one of our members had been quite ill and bedridden, and they were then in the traditional medical system that said, there's nothing we can do for you. You need to get your matters in order. And this person was, standing in front of us healthy, and recognize that that is not an unusual case, and that shouldn't be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. And so that's their path to change that, and that the individual well-being has an absolute impact on the community's well-being. And how do we bring that to bear? Then the illumination of the system. And it was a very interesting conversation because, and I've struggled with this myself, we have words to express amongst other things, but the words that we use are impactful. And what came up is the system does not have to change. It's absolutely, totally efficient the way it was intended to work, right? So the question is, if we want to evolve into something different, how do we create that? How do we create the beingness that's different without trying to change the system, which then basically, I think, and I heard from our group, is that the sense of frustration is, well, the system is just, and we don't want it that way. And so we're trying to shake the structure of an edifice that needs to crumble anyway and shouldn't have been erected in the first place. And so what can be in that place? And so in the offerings, what Hope people wanted to bring was modeling vulnerability. There was the conversation of creating safe spaces so that our voices that can create these new ways of being with one another and integration, that they're safe and they're heard, and we hold space for one another. Again, the hand at our back. And I had the privilege of hearing Nora Bateson, Gregory Bateson's daughter, the other day speak, and she posed a question to our group, which was phenomenal. And I posed it to this group, and then they just took off with it. And that was, think like a meadow. And so it's not a matter of systems, because a meadow isn't a system. One could say that, but then isn't it connected to the river, into the clouds? I mean, is it really systems? I mean, isn't that reductionist thinking? So if we think like a meadow, there's only unity. And within that is the hope, right? Is in the recognition. And so the word that I could have written down for myself from all of this would have been remembering who we really are and what really is. And it's in the illumination of what we've come to that has helped us forget. So in illuminating what we've forgotten, and then creating the remembering. And so I'll just show this again. So we had the think like a meadow, from general think to individual responsibility, illumination of, and the unity of all beings. And it was an honor. And thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And I know you might have to scoot off. So if you end up off screen, we've acknowledged you. Yeah, thank you. Bring us home, Carolyn.
Thanks. Great. So I had a great conversation with PK and Margie and Tom and Brenda. And it started looking at the system that we have so focused on amassing power and amassing things, whatever it is, and that system is broken because no matter how many trees we plant over here, no matter how many seeds we plant, it's still about I need to own more things than you, and that system is not working. And whoever owns more things also has a bigger voice. So we talked about that, and that one of the things that we need is smaller communities. That when we have, so not just, so that we have smaller conversations, actually just like Powerhouse does, that we have a community where we feel seen and heard and valued, and that personal connection makes it hard to discount somebody else. So we can, one of the themes that came up was, how do we get rid of tolerance for intolerance? And that is about talking and actually having a face to an idea, a face, a real person in front of us that has hopes and dreams and wishes and that we connect with. And now we have a conversation and a way to have growth based on differences. First, we need the connection, and then we can have the growth of our differences through differences. We talked about compassion and self-determination, that through self-determination, in order to have self-determination, we need to have connection, competence, and autonomy. And again, when we have those things, then we can speak up for ourselves. So that comes with, then from that we can have a revolution. So to actually respect people that are out protesting and doing whatever they need to do to express their voices, and to challenge the systems that we're in, which is our beautiful conversation from Brenda, Tom, Margie, and PK. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you for harvesting all the response. It's like, bye, Lisa. Thank you for being here. It's like, the big, I don't know why, I got a visual of a volleyball game for whatever reason. It's like all the speakers that came in the morning, they had, Dory loves volleyball. I just saw the big smile. And so it's like the expanse of the room was like the big ball going over the net. And then you caught everybody and you just harvested their volley back. So thank you for all of that, and all of what you've collected here will be shared with the participants tonight, so they have a chance to hear it before we meet again tomorrow morning in the Wisdom Circle. And you are deeply valued. You are the silent hands that at the organization's back, and I deeply appreciate you. And yeah, your love is just, we couldn't do it without you. And I'm not just saying that like everybody says that at the end of a thing. Like we couldn't hold the container that we hold for the change work that's happening without all of your hands and heart and the holding that you do, and so freely. So thank you.